what are going to be the probable outcome with an agreement, what's going to happen with an agreement, and if not, what other issues we would have at stake. And we cannot say more. I wish I could be able to say a little bit more, but we can't. So let me first try to share a slide with you. No, I cannot. Okay, I cannot. Nacho, I don't know if you can help me in this, or if not, I try to do something else. Okay.
Oh, yeah, yes. If you send it to me, I can share it. Thank you.
Okay, I have to send it to you. Okay, perhaps it's going to take a little bit time. So in the meantime, I'll try to speak. So the general idea is that, of course, we know that there's a whole change of regime. We were before in the internal market of the European Union. And now what we've got is a pure agreement. The typical, sorry. Okay. Okay, don't worry. I did something wrong. So can you see me and listen to me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, so I just forget it. Okay, so before what we had is common rules. This is very obvious what I'm going to say, but I think it's important to remind it. We had common rules and a common system to implement those rules that has its peak in the European Court of Justice. And now what we are going to have is a traditional, normal trade agreement, free trade agreement. The freer, the best, I would say. So the differences are huge, because we could have had some relationship in the middle, something similar what happens with Norway, with Switzerland, with Liechtenstein, or with Iceland, in which, although they are not part of the internal market of the European Union, they are very close to it because they belong to the European Economic Zone. But this is something that a long time ago was decided by the British government not to be. So what we have is a real, a pure trade relationship. Where we are going to have is a pure trade relationship. That means that the typical trade agreement would be to look item per item in the customs code. That would take about 3-4 years, and then establish those rules in which the trade relationship are going to be ruled by. But of course, that would take too long, and it's not that understandable, because we start from a totally integrated situation. So with a totally integrated situation, you wouldn't need that much if the negotiations go very smooth and fluently. Well, we have seen how the negotiations have done. It made sense in the past, I mean, when we were starting this negotiation process, to do it very rapidly and integrate it, so long there were a very good faith from both parts and trying to get the best possible agreement. I think that somehow there has been this good faith. But we have been stuck for many months in 3 issues. And I receive every morning a note coming from our delegations in Brussels. And I think that it could happen that we have major breakthroughs in these 3 issues that we got at stake. I will talk about them right now. And perhaps we can have an agreement. But still, these 3 issues are very thorny. The general idea is this. Okay. As we are totally integrated, the target of this negotiation is to have a trade agreement, at least in merchandise, but also the best we can do in services and many other issues as well, energy, data, transport, whatever, movement of businesses, capital movement, many things are involved in these negotiations. But we focus on the most important and difficult thing, which is the trade issue, at least for the moment. So once the UK breaks out from the European Union, we are not going to have the same rules, of course. It's a matter of sovereignty, as the British government has said so many times. But at the same time, when you have a trade partner, and it's very important, this trade partner for all of us, just to have the idea for Spanish figures, the UK is #3 best client of Spain, and the services surplus of Spain with the UK is the highest in the world, just to give some examples. So when you've got such an important trade partner, you have to be sure that trade is going to be fair and balanced. That is, that we have to rule out in the agreement the possibilities that any part, I'm not talking just about the British part, but also the European part, and give this assurance to the British side, it's important that we don't, any of the other parts don't use this kind of tricky figures that we know since very long time that can be very distortionary to trade. We can talk about state aids, we can talk about subsidies, we can talk about any kind of regulation that gives a non-fair advantage to one of our sides. We all have suffered in our trade agreements with anyone else in the world, things like that. So for that reason, if we want a good agreement that's totally comprehensive with no tariffs and no quotas, it's very, very important to be assured that this doesn't happen. So this is more or less the idea on both sides. None of the both sides now in the middle of the discussions would like to have an unfair agreement. So how do we do that? And that's the problem. How do we do that? Because it's not that easy to do that when you come from a totally integrated situation and you are not discussing item per item in your customs code. So the general idea has been, let's fix an agreement in which we have no quotas and no tariffs, and then let's think about the governance about this agreement. And this is one of the points. We've got 3 points that still are being discussed. One is what we call the level playing field, is what I've been talking about. How do we assure that on any side rules are going to be sufficiently equivalent so no one has an unfair advantage? The second point is how we implement this level playing field, which is the governance. And now we've got the problem of fisheries. So that's very specific, but I think it's very illustrative about what's at stake. Let's talk about fisheries. That's, it's very mediatic, but at the same time, it's very illustrative about what's going on in this negotiation. Okay, if we got a zero tariff, zero quota agreement, that means that all fish catched by British fishermen can enter the European Union with no tariffs at all and with no quotas at all. Well, bearing in mind that 80% of what the British fisheries catch goes to European markets, that means that the business here is we catch the fish and we sell it in Europe, because the British don't eat as much fish as the rest of the Europeans. So we have the consumers and the British have the waters and the fish. Until now, that was shared. So the big discussion here is, how are we going to share now this business in the new negotiation? An extreme position from the British side would be, okay, all the fish is caught in British waters, so it's my fish. And then the Europeans say, okay, but if no European business can fish in those waters, then this is my market. And I put a tariff or a quota in order to share the market in a non-renewable resources or difficult to renewable resource, which is the fish. So we are in the middle of this negotiation, how to share the market and how to share the waters. Because I think in too many occasions, people have thought about this negotiation about only how to share the water, but it's also about how to share the market, how to share the consumers. Okay, I hope that we will get a better agreement, a good agreement on this, and a fair agreement. We've got one side of the equation, the British have the other side of the equation. Let's hope that we reach an agreement. And more or less is the same with other issues as well. So what is going to change in any case in case we have an agreement. So because we've got two things here at stake, as I was saying before. One is the new regime, and the other point is what would happen in case we don't have an agreement. So in the case of the new regime, first of all, what we're going to have is customs that we didn't have before, which makes things much more complicated for imports and exports from and to the UK. Just to give an example, as far as I know, and it's the figures I have seen, the number of customs operations in the case of the UK are going to triple, because although the European trade with the European Union trade with the UK is more or less half of it, but the numbers of operations are 2/3, because if you bring something from America, from Australia, from Asia, usually the shipments are much bigger. So little shipments come from the rest of till now, the European Union. So the number of operations tripled. That means that the UK and also the European customs, but in our side is not such a big problem, because in percentage is not so big. So we have to, from the Spanish point of view or the French point of view, we had to make an effort, but it was much bigger, the effort required for the British authorities, and I'm very sure that they have done it. More people working on customs, bigger facilities, big parking lots for trucks, all those things that we have seen, especially in the zone of Kent. So first point, we have to have customs, and there's going to be, I hope not, but perhaps there are going to be problems of logistics, especially in the first weeks of the implementation of the new situation. Let's see how things go, but it's very important to understand that businesses will have to think about the possibilities of long queues. So perhaps they need to stock before that date, and the idea to schedule the issuing of their merchandise in order to avoid those queues. And this is something that I think all administrations involved are working a lot on, but still we cannot know what's going to happen at the beginning of next year. So logistics is going to be a problem, even if we have an agreement or not, in case all resources put in there that are huge are not sufficient or need to be redistributed, because we don't know for sure how things are going to come out and how people are going to behave in front of this new barrier, which is just to go through customs. It's not only customs, but on the physical side, but also on the taxation side. I'm not talking just to pay tariffs. That would be for the end of the discussion, but also how customs declarations and taxes, indirect taxes, are paid or are paid back. It's going to change completely. So it's very important for companies to understand that they need, probably they will need advisors both on the customs and the taxation side. Then controls, which are very important for certain merchandises. We have to understand that merchandises pass the border and can be a risk for the consumers or for the country. We have a lot of health controls for food and agricultural products in order to avoid plague and to protect the health. All that was avoided while the UK was in the internal market, because it was under the internal market rules. But now we've got a border. So these controls have to be implemented. And as you are very aware, I'm sure, this implementation is going to be phased in the case of the UK, in a 6-month period, in which customs declarations could be deferred in case of normal goods, but in case of those goods who need to be controlled, in the case of agro-food goods, fresher foods, those who can pose more risk to the health, are going to have immediate controls. And then we will have, for other kind of food, intermediate 3 months later, they will start the control, and the rest of the food will have the control after 6 months. The same for chemicals or pharmaceuticals, very important goods that need to be controlled at the border for control reasons. Okay, so this changed totally many markets. It's important, for example, I'm going to give you an example. furniture, and you might think, okay, furniture pose no problem at all. Well, that depends. Imagine a Spanish company brings some exotic goods coming from Brazil, and this is a tree. The good comes from a tree that is a protected species. Okay, for all protected species, we need to put controls at the border in order to avoid illegal traffic. So that good will come from Brazil. They will enter in Spain to build the furniture, and at the border in Spain, we will have this species protection control at the border. Till now, once they built a piece of furniture with that good, it was sent to the UK without no problem. Now, that piece of good need again to show that the good with which that piece of furniture was built comes from a legal source. So it's double control. Once the good comes into Spain and now to the UK. Just to give an example of how things complicate a lot with even if we had an agreement. So another point, rules of origin. Till now, all products produced in all parts of European countries, the more complex the goods, usually the value added is shared among many countries, especially inside the European Union, was just a European product. Imagine a car that's built in the UK and have many, which is the case, by the way, many components coming from Spain. Okay, it was to the rest of the world a European car, because although it's mainly built in the UK, it has components coming from France, coming from Spain, coming from Germany, but all were European, and they just were put inside the British car, and all that was European. The problem is what happens now with a component that comes from Spain, for example, in the automobile industry, as I was saying before, and it's built in a British car. And it needs to be exported, for example, to Japan or to the United States. Let's think about Japan, which is easier, in which there is an agreement with Japan and the UK, has been recently signed, and also there's an agreement between Japan and Spain. Okay, is it a pure British car? It is been sent to Japan because it has an Spanish component. Okay, in the case of the Japanese agreement, it has been said that all European components inside a British car will be considered British and covered by the agreement with Japan. But we cannot be sure that's going to be the same according to the rules of origin we established among both sides and with third parties. So it's going to create quite a mess. Only the rules for the rules of origin, it's about 1,000 pages manual, going item per item and looking what's going to happen. So this can distort quite a lot value added change. Okay, so just to give examples of how things complicate a lot, even with an agreement. This is the kind of things we have to bear in mind. What happens if we don't have an agreement? Then the landscape changes, but I would say that only in the taxation side. That is, we will have the same kind of new problems or new barriers in our bilateral trade between the European Union, in our case Spain, with the UK, as I was saying before, and on plus of that, in our customs declaration, is not only specifying the goods and the physical controls, but also we will have to pay for new tariffs. The British government published a general tariff for the whole world, similar to the common tariff in the European Union. I would say it's very, very similar. This would be applied to all European goods, and the same, the common external tariff will be applied to the UK goods coming into Spain and other European Union countries. And this would change a lot the rules of the game, because till now, in those goods, we have, of course, zero tariffs because it was inside the internal market. Just to give an example of what would happen to Spanish exports in case these tariffs are applied, these tariffs would hit 74% of all Spanish exports of goods in the UK, which is a quite figure. 3/4 of our exports will be hit by new tariffs. The most affected sector could be automobile, with tariffs between 10% and 16%. Then the second item in our tax code that goes to the UK, probably you don't know it, but it's interesting, is nuclear reactors and nuclear equipment, which is about 6% of our exports. And it can be also hit by a tariff. This one is a small one, but 2%. Then fruits and vegetables have quite high tariffs in the UK new tax code. Electrical machinery and apparel, that's also a very important export coming from Spain to the UK, will have also 2%. Textiles, 12%. Automobile components between 2 and 3%. And for example, wine, which is one of our most important agro-food exports, will have a quite high specific tariff. So what changes if we don't have an agreement mainly is that we will have not only non-tariff barriers that will be there, as I was telling you, logistics, customs declarations, taxations, and all that, but we also will have tariff barriers in the same way as the rest of the world. Something that probably is not desirable for both sides. Probably not. Surely it's not desirable on both sides. That would force to continue negotiating till we have a more traditional trade agreement like the one we have done with the rest of the European partners with the European Union have with the rest of the world. And I haven't talked about services that haven't been really focused in these months of negotiation, but services are crucial both for the UK and Spain. For the time being, it's not such a big problem because all directives on services and public procurement, that is very related to that, but I can talk about in a minute about public procurement later on. Till now, all the European legislation, regulations that we have in the internal market are part right now of the British legal body. So unless the British Parliament changes that dramatically, for the time being, we have exactly the same rules at both sides of the channel. But of course, there is not an agreement of how long can both parties move. And from a situation in which we have the same rules, what we need to do is to have an agreement in which we all are comfortable, so things are not going to change that much on both sides. So the current such an important traffic in services are going to be maintained. It's not secret that, for example, for the UK, financial services are crucial. And many other services, like, for example, engineering, not to say tourism, is crucial for Spain, just to give an example. Public procurement. Okay, the UK is a very open country in public procurement, and all regulation about public procurement in the European Union is now, as I said before, part of the legal body in the UK. So long things don't deviate that much, no, there are not major changes in that, still we will have a very, very harmonized situation. But also WTO rules in which the UK will fall in the 1st of January are very weak. Thresholds are very high. The number of sectors covered by WTO are very small. So we don't have a good legal framework in which to assure that public procurement on both sides is going to be safeguarded in a reasonable way. So what, just to finish, to have an idea is, I think that we will need the best agreement. The best agreement till now, in such a small period of time that we have been able to negotiate, its core is merchandise, is the free trade agreement. We need to work more on services, public procurement. Many other areas have been also settled. For example, energy, interconnectors, and the flow of energy has been also settled in the draft of the agreement. Transport is quite well settled as well in the agreement. And the idea that the British more or less are saying that we are not going to make any kind of social or environmental dumping, I think must be there. It's very important to have the political idea. It's very true. But when we are negotiating an agreement, what we need is legal terms. And that's the difficulty of that. the good faith is of course a prerequisite from both sides, and I'm very sure this is what's happening. But we need to convert that good faith, that idea of a balance of fair agreement, in legal terms, and that's where I think we will have to make this last effort. What the President of the Commission said about this last mile, and the Prime Minister as well, this last mile, we are in the middle of this, and I have to be optimistic. So I leave this optimistic message, because I think that perhaps we can have good news in the next days. Another point that's very important is ratification. From the British side, there's not much problem, because it's just the British Parliament. But from the European side, if it's a pure trade agreement, then we only need the ratification from the European Parliament. But if the legal services of the Council say, and the Parliament say, that some issues are national competence and need to be ratified by national parliaments, then the ratification process, especially for that parts of the agreements, will take longer. So we are in a very, very tight moment. We don't have much time. We don't know still, even if there is agreement, if we will have time to implement it before the 1st of January. But in any case, if there is an agreement, this is the real good news. Because how to implement it and how to ratify that, well, it would be quite an effort coming for our legal services, but I'm sure they will find imaginative solutions to put in place this agreement as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Álvaro. It's been a splendid allocution, and I think it has been very insightful for our members and attendants. I wanted to first ask some questions that we have. The first one pertains to precisely what you said about the ratification. And obviously, we have the President of Canada that still, like half the countries, are still to ratify it 3 years later. In that sense, do you think that there could be any danger for the treaty because I think if there is need for ratification, because what we have seen is that agreements like Japan have excluded the investment component in order to not have that ratification, or in Singapore it was split in two to be able to approve the pure trade agreement. The second one is that obviously there is this implementation pending approval that has been applied with respect to the national parliament's approval. But I don't think there is precedent of this situation being applied to the European Parliament approval. And there are some voices which say that if the agreement is not done this week, that there is no time to make the proper scrutiny. Do you think this provisional approval, with the approval of the member states' government, could be done pending approval of the European Parliament?
Well, what I think, or I can have my opinion, is irrelevant, because the real opinion is going to be the legal services of the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council. Which and as far as I know, still there is some discussion about that. Part of what the notes coming from Brussels every day tells us is how this discussion are advancing. So the big issue is, can we split the agreement or not? So can we split the agreement in a purely trade part that can be ratified by the European Parliament, and then the legal services of the European Parliament will see if the procedure to pass this ratification has been compliant or not with the regulation of the Chamber. That's up to them. From the Spanish government point of view, is once we've got an agreement, the sooner the better. But we will have to comply and to abide to what the legal services state about this. Or at most, and in any case, always, of course, we will have the Court of Luxembourg for these issues. So it's not that clear, because it's such a big agreement with so many parts that for sure surely some parts are going to be need to be ratified by national parliaments. But in order to implement it the sooner, the idea is if we can split that ratification in two parts. And they are working very hard to find solutions. I think it's the same case on both administrations, both the British and the European one. We want this to work out the best we can. But what I can say to you is the position of the Spanish administration. What the legal service are going to do, we don't know, because it's up to them. The only people who can give an opinion that that has legal power is the people who have that competence.
Thank you very much, Álvaro. And now I give the word to Albert Cole from Sabadell, patron of the Chamber and member of our executive board.
Álvaro, good morning. Thank you, Nacho, and congratulations for a very well-developed speech. I think you said a lot of very interesting things. You put some very good examples about the fish and the furniture, which are a real eye-opener in terms of what the challenges of this process will be. But wherever I read or whoever I talk to, Álvaro, I get always the impression, and I think you conveyed the same message, that the fact of a no deal is pretty much unimplementable. So my question to you is, what is your personal opinion on, and I understand that from the media perspective and the negotiation strategies, we need to be as harsh as possible. But bearing in mind that there is now the word saying, okay, we have 97% of the deal is done, let's work for the 3%. You talk about, the ratification flexibility, where there is will, there are means to be found. So what is your personal opinion as to whether a no deal is actually physically implementable, considering how British and Spanish companies, according to your knowledge, have been preparing for this?
Well, implementable in the legal point of view, of course it is. I mean, at the 1st of January, we would have tariffs on both sides. The issue if it's implementable or feasible from an economic point of view, that I think is your question. I mean, we all know that at the same time, improving trade is a win-win game. Destroying trade is a lose-lose game. That's the reason why we make trade agreements. It's the real reason. And in a trade agreement, both sides give up a little bit of their sovereignty. It's very important to understand that. In order to improve the welfare of the people living in my country, I give up a little bit of what I can do because I limit the sovereignty of my country in order to limit the sovereignty of the other country. We are limiting both sides, and at the same time establishing common rules in order to help trade to happen and improve welfare. So any calculation that we make on any side about the possibility of a not agreement and the destruction of a big part of our trade is not rational to that. It's not rational. So the rationality brings to reach an agreement, but not always can be the difficulties and the hurdles in this agreement can be solved in such a small period of time. That the UK and the European Union will have a trade agreement, I think nobody has any doubt about that. The problem is that, are we going to be able to do that in just these 9 months of negotiations we had only ahead of us? Or we are going to need more time, as we have always had with our former trading partners? This is the real question, not if we are going to have an agreement or not. Because even if we don't reach an agreement, we will continue negotiating. What we won't have is a quick, rapid agreement in which it needs such a big amount of good faith and change some political positions that perhaps in 9 months is impossible to do. But in more time, for sure.
Thank you, Álvaro.
Thank you very much, Álvaro. Now I give the word to Juan Botín from Banco Santander, patron of the chamber and vice president of the chamber as well.
Buenos días, Álvaro. Good morning. How are you?
Hello.
Thank you very much for your fantastic speech. I would like to concentrate my question in the typical activity that the economic wing and the Chamber of Commerce in Madrid under the preside by our King Philip VI.
We missed you the start of your question. If you could repeat it, sorry, it went off the connection. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I will start. Thank you. Well, the question is, I would like to do my connection more connected to the trade activity that we are doing. And as you know, last week we had in Madrid was the fourth international summit with the presence of under the King Philip VI and COE, Cámara de Comercio, Four Renovadas, well, 3 or 4 other key organizations, and under that the presentation was a joint declarations of the importance of doing more synergy between the public and the private sector, but particular in that comment say, in addition, the state foreign network must be turned into a true instrument of economic intelligence relying on the Spanish Chamber of Commerce abroad. So I would like to see how you can little bit elaborate it. So I know we have a very big link traditionally, but how we can probably do this in order to try to help the SME companies, our famous pymes, in this process of digitalizations, sustainability, and going forward. Thank you very much, Álvaro.
Okay. I have spent many years in the public administration. One of the difficulties for any policy is to reach to the last corner of the country. And although the Spanish or any administration is very wide, I used to say that we only have an office in almost every village in Spain to pay taxes, but not that much for other things. If you want to pay your taxes, you will have an office from the Agencia Tributaria, from the Taxation's Bureau, almost in every corner of the country. But for example, to digitalize companies or to help them with Brexit, we don't have so many offices. So we need the partnership with the business associations, and the chambers, of course, are one of those. That's what I'm saying. So in order to find this capillarity, in order to be able to implement policy, in many cases, what we need is the chambers. It's what I'm saying. So digitalization is an example, but we have many others, or Brexit as well. When we talk about how to make companies prepare for Brexit or understand what they're going to face from the 1st of January, it's very important also to do things, or to do all our things, and to share what we do from the public administration with the private sector through the chamber. So I suppose that you wanted to highlight this so wonderful relationship we have from the Spanish administration side and the chamber, both in London and the UK, and of course back in Spain.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now we have the next question coming from Adam Munday, general manager at Meliá Hotels International, and where we would be hosting this webinar if it were not because of the situation we are with respect of COVID. So Alan, please, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Nacho, and good morning, Mr. Nadal. I represent Meliá Hotels International in the United Kingdom. As you know, we have 3 properties in London and a growing portfolio in the north of England. Spanish tourism is incredibly important to our hotels, all hotels in London, but especially Meliá Hotels being our #1 feeder market. I think recent events with COVID-19 and the impending Brexit are adding complications for travel, and I am slightly concerned, and maybe you can help me change my opinion, that Spanish people might start to consider to choose another location before they choose London, and I wanted to know whether you think that Brexit may cause people to consider staying within the EU for their travels, or you think London will bounce back with the Spanish population. And my second question is around your opinion around the hospitality industry and how quickly you think it will recover after recent events.
Well, I think that's hitting most by far the tourism industry, and you are in the middle of that, is the pandemic.
Sí.
Of course. If I talk about Brexit purely, then I can give you my impression of what might happen with tourism. But bear in mind that I think that the real shock comes from the pandemic, not from the Brexit. Brexit is not going to change much. It's not part of the agreement in the sense that not much has been said about persons. When we talk about the agreement, it's an economic agreement, most of it. But we know for sure that the British government, in any case, is not going to change rules for tourists. I mean, Spanish tourists are going to be able to come into the UK, have their holidays, spend their money, and get back. All issues are that can be more thorny. It's not with tourists, but with settlement, which is quite a different issue at all. And that is for sure, yes, and it's very true, an issue that deals a lot with sovereignty. You can have agreements with other blocs, but it has a lot to do with sovereignty. So in the case, is Brexit going to pose any problem for tourists? I would say in a big yes and a little but. The little but, because imagine our situation from the Spanish administration. Last year, we received 19 million Brits in Spain. So we would like them to come back after the pandemics.
Of course.
So we have some issues there that are needed to be solved, in this case, not in the agreement, but after the agreement on bilateral basis. For example, social security, pensions, and healthcare, which is very, very important. Things like that are not the big important part of tourism, but part of it are going to be solved. But I think that it's in the both administration aim, for sure, to have the best bilateral agreement on these issues, the sooner the better. But it is true that until we've got this agreement, for example, Spanish tourists in the UK will need a private insurance, while British tourists in Spain would need it. But I'm sure that we will have some kind of agreement in order to solve that once we know how the final relationship is going to be.
Thank you.
And in case of the pandemics, okay, we all pray. We all pray that this is solved the sooner the better, because it's the start in the economy in a much extent. For sure, the touristic industry, the tourism industry is the one worst hit by far, but many others as well. It's not only hospitality; it's many other industries as well.
Thank you for your opinion.
Thank you very much. Now we have the next question from our board member, Cristina Gines. Cristina, please, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Good morning, Álvaro. Thank you so much. I joined the rest in thanking you for your speech and also for trying to give us the very last piece of information on this matter. I missed the beginning of your presentation, so I don't know if what I'm going to ask you answered already, but I apologize if that's the case. But well, I mean, I have many questions because we're very concerned about public procurement and about, I don't know, intercompany workers, why is going to come of that. But my question is, it has always been said that, well, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. That was the motto at the very beginning of the negotiation. But if there is no agreement next week, if we really go to a no deal, what happens with those things that have been agreed so far? Everything just falls into a cliff. So, I mean, I'm guessing that there are some exceptions about air transport, about financial services. Some things are an exception of that no deal. But what happens for real in that case?
Okay, you're right. Some contingency measures, they are called contingency measures, have been proposed unilaterally on both sides in case there is no agreement. And well, this idea that everything has to be agreed before anything is agreed was how the conversation started many months ago. But once we saw that there were distant positions on some issues, then we started with what they call the salami approach. So what we are discussing right now is a very important core agreement inside a free trade zone, to create a free trade zone or a free trade agreement with no quotas and no tariffs that will only cover very strict trade issues, while other things, like you were saying, public procurement, services, and all that will need other agreements to be discussed later. But this is a very strange negotiation. No trade agreement has been like this one. This is something we have to understand. Usually, imagine our agreement with Canada or with Japan or with Mercosur. You have a level of trade like this that you want to increase. Here you've got the rules and you've got here the level of trade. So you reach an agreement with Canada and you open your markets legally, and then trade happens. But we come from the best possible integration system we can think about, which is the European internal market. So now we are going to have, for example, in public procurement, only WTO rules, which have nothing to do with what we really have in our internal market. So rules come to this place on the 1st of January, very low. But still the trade is there. And the British legislation is exactly the same one on the 1st of January as it was on the 31st of December. Unless this legislation changes and start distorting trade, we are still here. So we need an agreement in order to this floor of legal issues to improve it, so everyone is assured that in the future, nobody is going to do things against the bilateral trade. But in the meantime, nothing is going to change dramatically. But we will still need to negotiate, that's very important, better legal terms, better floors for both sides. But the problem is tariffs. But if we don't reach an agreement on tariff, then we will have a real distortion, a huge distortion on the 1st of January. That's why both parties have concentrated to the core agreement, because we need it in a much deeper extent than other agreements and other issues as well. For example, energy. Imagine that the 1st of January, the UK cannot buy electricity from the rest of the European continent as a result of Brexit. It can be a disaster. So that's why there is a draft on energy agreement. Imagine transport. That's why there is a draft on transport. So the core agreement is the one that maintains the situation the best we can, in the best position we can, and then we will have better legal terms for other issues. But of course, in the meantime, till we've got these better legal terms, it might happen that the British government and parliament changes the rules of the game. This is what they are saying, believe in our good faith. But at the same time, we, the rest of the European, and I think that is equally the same for the British, good faith is good, but it's better to have legal terms.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you, Álvaro.
Thank you very much, Cristina. Now we have a question from Miriam Garcia Bernabé from ES Translator Interpreted. And her question is to which extent the relationship between the UK and Spain will be dictated just on the terms of the agreement that is reached or not between the EU and the UK, and which is the bandwidth that there is for bilateral activities between the two governments and bilateral agreements. Thank you.
Most of it is, but not all of it. That depends on the competence we are thinking about. Trade is all the European competence, but for example, I was saying before, health services or social security or direct taxation is arranged bilaterally. And we can have many bilateral cooperation, a lot of bilateral cooperation that doesn't depend on European funds or European programs in universities, in education, many things, promoting culture, many things that is part of the bilateral relationship are not part of the European agreement. Although we must understand that in economic issues in which the European Union has a lot of competences, it's crucial what's been decided in this agreement. But not everything is managed because the European Union doesn't have competence on everything. It's mostly most of that is shared competence between member state and European Union, but still there are many competences residing in the national governments that are not inside the European Union. So in those issues, of course, we will have the best bilateral relationship we can, and I think is in the same aim of the British authorities to do exactly the same.
Thank you very much. And the next question, it comes from, well, Miriam first expressed her appreciation. And the next question comes from Jose Somalo, a fintech consultant based here in London, but who has many clients in the European Union. And his question is whether his services will be subject to any tariffs and which will be the VAT regulation and from the 1st of January. Thank you.
Okay. VAT doesn't change in the sense that things are going to be more or less the same, but with e-commerce. E-commerce, especially B2C, I mean business to consumer, changed the rules a lot. We've got, if somebody is very interested, we've got all this kind of information in our economic and commercial office. Many little notes about explaining many things dealing with indirect taxation in e-commerce and customs procedures, everything people might like to know about. So first point, VAT doesn't change a lot the amount, what's going to be paid, but it changes quite a lot how to solve your taxation declaration, how to put your taxation declaration, and how things are going to change. So it's better to I can hand out this information, because in case it's a British company here, I don't think much will change. Although, for example, refunds that before you could get coming from Spain, imagine you are selling from the UK in Spain and you are going to get a refund. That refund had to be paid by the Spanish authority, but then you can ask them to the British authority and there was a compensation. Now that won't happen anymore. You will have to ask for the refund directly to the Spanish authorities. Just to give an example of what things change. In case of tariffs, as I was saying, tariffs is for goods, never for services. So for services, you might come across non-tariff barriers, which is another issue. But the tariffs will be only for goods, but we don't know if we are going to have tariffs on the 1st of January. If somebody asks me, I can only answer, watch the news.
Thank you very much, Álvaro. It has been a splendid Q&A session. I think, and the feedback that we are receiving live from the attendance is very good. So again, congratulations for another excellent and very clear, frank allocution. So, well, with this we finish this last Meliá Business Breakfast webinar. I think we have had a splendid roster of speakers, and probably we have finished with a top on this occasion. And well, we will see you in the next year, where we will strive to keep the level of quality in this Meliá Business Breakfast webinar. Thank you very much, Álvaro, for updating and giving a very insightful view on the current situation in this crunch moment of the Brexit negotiations, where everything it's up for grabs and things change hour to hour. I think you have brought clarity to a very complex environment. So, and I wish, on the name of the chamber, a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And Álvaro and our audience, we hope to see you in the new year with further activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation.
Of course, our pleasure.